My name is Emily McCann. I'm the president of Citizen Schools. We are a national nonprofit based in Boston. I want to say a big thank you to my colleague Michelle Ahaus, who's here today, was a former member of the Ad Club. And yes, and she is the one who brokered this opportunity, so I'm thrilled to be here. And I want to say thank you to the Ad Club for giving a very busy working parent the chance to reflect on her leadership journey. It is something I don't get a chance to do very often, and feel honored to have the chance to do with all of you. So I want to first say a thank you to all the speakers from this morning. I laughed, I cried more, I had to reapply my mascara, and I felt like I was connecting with these leadership stories in a really significant way. So thank you to everybody who has come up and shared their heart and their dreams and their journey with us so far. It's an inspiration to me, and I'm trying to figure out how to work it into my remarks right now. But I want to start also by sharing an epiphany that I had with all of you. It was about a month ago, and I don't know about you, but I have epiphanies really, really late at night because it's the only time that it's actually quiet in my world. So this was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was sitting in my kitchen, and I was going through emails from the day, and a lot of them were work emails, and there was one email from my mother, and it just had a very simple subject line. It said, "Forward, Langia." And I've only met one Langia in my life, and that's Langia McCafferty, who was a history teacher of mine when I was at a boarding school in New Hampshire, and she is recently been appointed to the District Court of the United States as the sole district appointee from New Hampshire, which is the highest judicial honor that one can have in the state. And the link was a video from her investiture ceremony. And I clicked on it. It was a good time to watch a video. And she was talking all about the mentors, the teachers, the leaders in her life that have shaped her path. And at the end of her remarks, she said something very simple and very poignant. She said, "My mission in life and my mission in this court, in leading this court, is to simply honor all people." And she said, "I think that should also be the mission of every educator, every parent, every leader in this earth, is to honor all people, because everybody has something to share and everybody has something to learn." And I had one of those cinematic moments, I don't know if you've ever had this, where everything stood still and then my life sort of started rushing past me. And I started to think about all the places I've lived and the leaders I've worked with. And the one red thread that I could draw across all of those experiences and those relationships was this idea that those institutions and those people honored everyone that they came in contact to. And when I thought about Citizen Schools, which is the place where I landed 10 years ago, almost serendipitously, it is a place that honors all people and the role they play in making America a great place. So, with that, I want to start my official story, and I want to start the story at the end of the story. And the end of the story is where I am now, which is Citizen Schools. And it's a place that embraces this code brilliantly. And in order to introduce this to you, I want you to hear about it from the people who are part of this community. So with that, I'm going to cue a short video.
Yes, it's okay. Except for that one part where it says, "I get amazing experiences with inspiring people." I would have liked if it said, "I have amazing experiences with inspiring people." With Citizen Schools or an extended day, you have more of something to look forward to. You're not just looking forward to going home, you're looking forward to coming into Citizen Schools and sitting down. The staff, they're really interactive and nice and kind, and you can really relate to them.
And being with them every day, I feel like I grow.
The apprenticeships are so much fun. Meeting people that actually work inside of a certain career that you might want to pursue yourself. I had activism, and then I had solar cars. You have a range of opportunities and a range of things you can do, so you're not really limited to one path.
I was really surprised at how much the kids kind of got inside my heart and my mind.
Families and kids and the staff and partner organizations are all working together with a joint vision. I mean, that's what it takes.
So I think Citizen Schools is an opportunity for you to brighten up your future and make it a place where you want to be.
All right, so those were some of the folks from our community at Citizen Schools. You met Talia, who is the student who really sits at the center of our world. And you saw Andrew Bott, the principal, Mark Greenlaw from Cognizant, who is one of our citizen teachers. And these are all people who are coming together to help close the opportunity and achievement gap for low-income students in Boston and across the country. So Citizen Schools, we're a national nonprofit. We started about 20 years ago, and we're founded on a big idea. And the big idea is that there's an achievement gap in education that is really fueled by an opportunity gap in our society. And I'm gonna move, and that is me when I was a kid. So we're gonna move back from that. Okay, we'll stay here. That was a sneak peek at just how darn cute I was as a kid. Okay, so the opportunity, so what we are talking about here is an achievement gap in America, a wealth-based achievement gap, right? That achievement gap has, over the past 30 plus years, which is probably about the time that many of you have been alive in this room, that has grown twofold. And one of the reasons that that continues to grow in our society is that there is a massive investment gap. An investment gap between what lower income families are spending for extracurricular learning and enrichment opportunities and what middle and upper income families are spending. So that by the time kids are reaching middle school, upper income children have 6,000 hours more extracurricular learning and enrichment opportunities than low-income kids. So when we talk about kids entering middle school, which is the population we serve 2, 3 grade levels behind, it's really not a surprise why that's happening, right? They have not had the same access to tutoring and Spanish lessons and violin lessons and sports teams and even preschool that their middle and upper income peers have enjoyed. And that opportunity gap is manifesting itself in challenges in keeping up academically. So what we aim to do at Citizen Schools is we aim to start to close that achievement gap. We add 3 hours to every student's day in the middle schools in which we work, and that's about 32 schools serving about 5,000 kids across the country. We add 3 hours a day, and we fill that hour with those things that those kids have not had in their elementary years. So with extra academic support time. And we fill it with real hands-on learning projects because middle school kids are starting to feel like they want to fit into the adult world and they want to understand how that works and they want to start to produce things. So we create these 10-week seminars for kids where they are creating a product in partnership with citizen volunteers, and we call those apprenticeships. And that's what you heard Mark and you heard Talia talking about on the video. And apprenticeships are led by people like all of you who come in and do 2 things. One, they give these kids access to great role models who can help narrate their path through college into the workforce, and who can help them make the connection between the work they're doing today in their schools and the future career opportunities that they want to pursue. So we'll have engineers from Google come in and build robots with kids or help kids use algebraic equations to program a video game on a droid. We'll have kids work with architects from Shepley Bulfinch to build scale models, or with lawyers from WilmerHale to argue mock trials in front of federal court judges, or work with AOL staff to actually develop PSAs on bullying. And this does 2 things. This does a few things for kids. 1, it builds their confidence that they can produce things. 2, it helps them understand, as I said before, the connection between the math and the science and the English that they're studying and how those things are applied in real-world careers. And it gets them excited about learning. So, sorry about that. Citizen Schools is great really for 3 reasons, I think. The engine of this program is citizens, right? It's recent college graduates who come in to teach and work with our kids, and it's folks like you who teach our apprenticeships. It's great because the program is having an outsized impact. You saw here that we are closing the achievement gap in middle school, we are closing the achievement gap in high school graduation, and we are closing the achievement gap in college enrollment and college completion, even though we only work with kids in middle school. And the third thing that is amazing about this place and that really relates to my leadership journey is that this is a place that honors all people. It honors students and their potential. It honors citizen teachers who are our volunteers as education's greatest natural resource to come in from the sidelines and into the classrooms. It honors parents as partners in student engagement, and it honors teachers and principals and superintendents as stewards of our nation's future. So that's why I came here 10 years ago. It's why I stay, because this is really in my bones. So now I want to share with you a few stories of institutions and leaders that have shaped my path and have led me to this place where I can, on a daily basis, honor all people. Now we're back to the kid picture. Okay, so this is my brother and I as kids. We grew up on the campus, a boarding school campus called St. Paul's School in Concord, New Hampshire. And it was a sort of idyllic childhood. I sometimes analogize it to either the Truman Show or Pleasantville, right? Because it was a bit of this bubble that we lived in where it was incredibly safe and incredibly beautiful. But it was a little bit of a strange juxtaposition, I will say. My parents were very young when they had us. They were, this is the campus. These are my parents. They were 21 when my brother was born and 22 when I was born. And they were pretty much kids themselves. And I would say that it was a strange upbringing because we were probably living just above the poverty line. I think my dad was making about $10,000 as a teacher when my brother was born. But we lived in this place that was designed for and populated by really the world's elite. And we didn't have many material possessions growing up, but we had this rich supply of resources in playing fields and libraries and gyms and ponds and a dining hall with endless hot chocolate. And it was just amazing. And sometimes I feel like I grew up with more than one brother because our house was attached to a dorm in which there were 40 boys living. And all of those boys treated our house as their adjunct dorm room. So when I was 8, life was hard. Life was very hard. I had a lot of boys in my world. When I was 12, life was awesome because I had so many boys in my room. So that was great. My parents, they didn't enforce hierarchy that often, but they really leaned in on issues of character. My mom's, I think, favorite quote and the way she just conducted herself was according to Maya Angelou's quote that people will often forget what you did or what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And she lived her life that way. My dad was a teacher, he was a coach, he was an admissions officer, he was a college counselor. Everything he did was in service of the kids whom he was developing and sending off into the world. And I really began to see teacher as leader, and I really began to understand this concept of honoring every person where they are, meeting them where they are, understanding their story, and then tailoring your approach accordingly. There was one place in particular where this came into sharpest relief for me as it relates to my dad, and this was in the wrestling room. My dad was a wrestling coach for 30 years, and believe it or not, I chose the wrestling room as my third space in childhood, behind my home and my school. And every day after school, in the winter months, I would head over to the wrestling room to watch wrestling practice that my dad ran. And this place smelled like dirty socks stuffed in your nose. It was 80 degrees, and it was full of adolescent boys wearing tight polyester singlets. And there was an 8-year-old that I could find that ever wanted to come with me, particularly a girl. But it was my magic place. And I think it was my magic place. It's where I saw my dad, who was such a leader and a role model for all these kids, get down on the mat with them. He would spar with them. He would connect with them. He would drill with them. And he would talk to them about the equal importance of physical stamina and emotional strength. And I always noticed at the meets, which his team usually won, he was the only coach who was on the mat with his wrestlers. The others were sitting in a chair on the sidelines watching. He was down on the mat moving with them. And I realized that this was because in many ways he was trying to show them that he was right there with them. He was honoring them for what they were doing, and he was partnering with them to help them succeed. And this was a motley crew of kids, a motley crew of kids. It was generally the kids who were looking for a niche at St. Paul's. Many of the kids were low income, many students of color. And in my father and in this team, they found a place that honored them and honored their story, even though it was very different from the rest of the kids at St. Paul's. So that was my first lesson in honor. Living in this environment cemented my desire to actually remain in this environment. And that was my dad as a wrestling coach, or my parents now. And when I was graduating from college, I was clear that I was moving into teaching. And my dad looked at me and he said, you have lived in an educational institution all your life. You've only for 21 years understood what it means to have students at the center. He goes, that is so important. And this is, by the way, the exact opposite advice we give to every college graduate now, which is get yourself into teaching. That's the most important thing you can do. But he said to me, take a risk and get conversant in a new language. He said, that's how you're going to find your leadership voice. He said, you can always come back, but go take a risk. And so I did, and I took probably the biggest risk of my life, and I moved to New York City. And I call it a risk because it wasn't simply that I moved into the world of investment banking, and it wasn't that I was sort of a small town girl from New Hampshire in the big city. It was a risk because it was a world I did not understand. I had not seen a periodic table of elements since I was in 5th grade, and I was assigned to the chemical mergers and acquisitions group. I don't know what phosphates are. I don't know what styrene is, so I don't know how to help companies trying to sell those things. I hadn't taken a math class in college, which, shame on the university I attended, did not force me to do. And I had never worn a suit, which was basically what I had to wear every day for 16 hours a day. So I was moving from a world in which I spent my mornings reading and talking about literature and my afternoons frolicking about on the sports fields in high school and college to a place where for 16 hours a day I was really in boot camp, trying to understand how to value companies. And it was a challenge. It was a real challenge. I felt like a fish out of water many times. And then I met my new boss. His name was Purna Sigurdi. And he was brought in to help JP Morgan create a chemical mergers and acquisitions Goliath. And they said to him, you have 2 years to move JP Morgan from a non-player in this sector to the top of the league tables on Wall Street. And he didn't flinch. But what was interesting is the way he went about that. And what he did was he embraced the youth in our group. He embraced the investment banking analysts in our group. There were 3 of us. And he said, the strength of this team will rise and fall on your shoulders. And if you understand the work you're doing, because you're doing 90% of the work at this point, if you understand that and you can help us grow and develop, we will get there. And so he honored all of us, no matter where we came from, including me, who knew absolutely nothing. He honored all of us. He took me to every client meeting. He sat down with me for hours showing me how to evaluate companies so that I didn't walk in with a number that was 2 billion lower than expectations, which is what I did the first 2 times I was in a client meeting. And he was asked 2 times to have me removed from the project. And he honored me as a leader, even though at that point I was 22. And I remember walking into a client meeting, and the CEO, I sat down next to the CEO, and he looked at me and he said, honey, why don't you go get me some coffee before we get this meeting started? And much to my dismay, I actually got up, and I started to go get coffee. And Purna grabbed my arm, And he brought me back to the table and he said, "Sir, this woman is the only one who knows what your company is worth in this room. So my guess is you want her here when the meeting starts. I'll get your coffee." And that to me was probably the most honorable thing that anybody at JP Morgan had ever done for me, and remains to this day really a defining moment in my leadership, because that is exactly the way I want to embrace the youth in the organization in which I work. Journey gets a little more twisted from here. So I'm going to invoke Sheryl Sandberg. I'm not going to talk about being bossy, because I think I agree with Anna Navarro that that's a really positive quality in many ways. And I'm also going to agree with the assertion that men do need instructions once in a while, including this man here. So after JP Morgan, I headed to, there was a natural break point, thank gosh, in investment banking after about 3 years, where they let you make a decision on what you want to do next. And my decision was very clearly, I need to go figure out where I belong, because I love business fundamentals, but I'm not married to the content of this job. And so let me go back to a place that maybe can help me find the intersection, and that was business school. And so I took every entrepreneurship course, every innovation course, every leadership course I could find, and had my head set on moving into nonprofit education. I also had my heart set on this man right here. And this is my husband, Sean McCann. We met on probably the most awkward date in the history of blind dates in college. And we were very, very different people. He hails from a big city, Toronto, Canada. He's one of 11 children. He lost his parents and 6 of his siblings in a fire when he was 6, and found a way to parlay the anger and I think the confusion into an incredibly, incredibly successful run as a student and a hockey player at a school called De La Salle in Toronto, and entered Harvard as an independent and paid his way through college. And what was so magnetic about him was that he found a way to meet just about every single human being on the Harvard campus when we were there. He was good friends with the Zamboni driver and good friends with the dean of students. He was good friends with the custodians and the folks who served us dinner, and excellent friends with his professors. And he made friends who spanned from across the globe. And this was a man who had figured out early in life that you need to honor those around you, because there's so much you need to learn. And as a 6-year-old searching for meaning, that's all he could rely on, is the ability of others to teach him. So I just knew at this point I couldn't live another minute without him. And so we got married, and he was playing professional hockey at the time in Florida. Go figure. And Florida, it's a tourism mecca, if any of you have ever been there. It is not a nonprofit education mecca, and certainly wasn't back in 1999. So my network job search that I had spent months preparing for fizzled very quickly, and I made a decision to move to a place that I thought had at least kids at the center, if not students at the center. Right, happiest place on earth. So I headed to the happiest place on earth, and I would tell you, I don't know, this was not my happiest place on earth when I first arrived there. I was living in Orlando, and this was a natural place to work in Orlando. But my only experience with Disney World before that came when I was 12, and my parents decided begrudgingly that they would take us to Disney World when it was raining, because there wouldn't be any lines. And so we were at Disney World with no lines, and I'm telling you, it was, the lines were tight and short, and so was the fun. Because when you're riding on a 70-mile-per-hour roller coaster getting pelted with rain in the face, there's something about the rush that's diminished. So that was my only experience, and Epcot was under construction. So yeah, it wasn't much to do. So that was my experience with it. So I didn't walk in feeling like this was going to be an amazing opportunity. But I knew that there's always a lot to learn anywhere you go, and I felt like I had a good fundamental base of business, a sort of business understanding. And I also was anticipating that it would be impossible to strike gold twice in terms of a leader who would embrace me as somebody new to this industry. But I did. And I met the boss of our strategic planning group. His name was Doug McGuire. And he was very different than Perna. He wasn't smooth. He looked like Goofy, actually. He was really tall and lanky. And in case any of you don't remember what Goofy looks like, there he is. He's really tall and lanky and his goofy smile, and he was always really happy. And I didn't know if I could take him seriously at first, because he was just like, hey, how are you? Tell me about you. And I liked that, but I kind of was like, where's the intensity? I'm used to my dad and Perna and my husband, who were pretty intense people. But what I realized pretty quickly is that he actually cared how I was. And what he believed, like Perna and my father and my mother, was that he had to invest in the youth at Disney, because that was the future of the company, and that was the future of our society. And so he took me, just like Perna, under his wing. And he said, I'm going to tell you the secret to success in this place. It is not sitting in your office. He goes, you need to be out there in the parks. I'm going to take you out there. We're going to talk to customers, and we're going to see if they're actually happy. We're going to talk to the cast members, folks working on the grounds at Disney, and we're going to see, how are they doing? How are they handling some of the new innovations that we're talking about rolling out? And he took me to my second, I'll call horrific experience at Disney, which is he took me to the bowels under the Magic Kingdom. And under the Magic Kingdom is kind of it's an odd place. I walked in and Chip and Dale had their heads off and were smoking. And Cinderella was drinking a beer. I swear to God, she was drinking a beer. And I looked at Doug and I said, Doug, and he goes, this may be the happiest place on earth. It's also a business. He goes, just start talking to people. And that was another lesson in honoring everybody, that collectively can create a place and can help define a place where you work. So I was there for a number of years. This was a place where I actually learned about scarcity. Believe it or not, it feels like that's the land of plenty. But when I was there was during September 11th. And after that, the bottom fell out on international and domestic tourism. And what we had to do as a company is we had to figure out different ways to innovate. If we couldn't spend money to build things, we had to find new ways to keep people fulfilled. And one of the things that Doug told us to do is he said, get out there more. And he said, get out and understand the community in which you live. He goes, that is a really good way to continue to remain invested in this place, because they didn't want people to leave even though salaries had frozen. And as I said, innovation had halted. And so I went out and I started teaching junior achievement curriculum at a middle school. And that is where I came face to face. And it was a sweet face, many sweet faces with the opportunity gap. These kids very, very much wanted to have my job. Very, very much. And yet they did not have any sense of how to get there. They didn't even understand. They didn't know what the stock market was as I began to teach this curriculum. And what I realized is that the number of kids, and you can see here on the slide, the number of low-income kids who actually start in the education pipeline gets very small as you get later and later in that journey. And what I realized is that I wanted to take all that I had learned from Perna and from Doug and my dad about honoring all people, and I wanted to figure out how to move to an institution that I felt did that well and that could address this opportunity and achievement gap that I saw. So I came back full circle to Citizen Schools. And these are just some slides, but I want to share just one quick story, which is about the way that we honor all people and the way we bring people together. We call it sort of a dream team to keep kids in school engaged and learning and growing. And this is a story of Adam Barriga. His grandfather, who's pictured in that picture, was a Peruvian immigrant who came to Massachusetts 30 years ago and has for 30 years worked in the State House as a custodian. And this is Adam at his WOW, which is what we call the culmination of our apprenticeships. And he had taken a course called It Is Rocket Science with a man named David Mantis, who was a biochemical executive and the son of a NASA engineer. And he had always sent off back rockets in his backyard with his dad and gone to visit museums of science with his grandfather. And he wanted to bring that opportunity to low-income kids. So he worked with Adam and a group of middle schoolers to set off rockets in the backyard of the school that Adam attended. And at this WOW, Adam was talking to executive leaders and political leaders about how he had, for his WOW, helped work with a team of NASA engineers in West Virginia to do a simulated lunar landing, and how he had helped that rocket ship move through windstorms and solar flares, and he had used vectors to help it land in the appropriate place. And his grandfather turned to one of our staff and he goes, "This is absolutely amazing." He said, "My grandson is speaking on the same marble floors that I have cleaned for 30 years. He said, "This is opportunity in action." He said, "This is the American dream." And that is why I have stayed here for 10 years, and that is why I continue to honor all people in the spirit of my parents and Perna and Doug, and on my husband, Sean, and why I do this for the 4 children who I have had since I've been at Citizen Schools, who all look the same, kind of, right? And who all, frankly, look like my husband, who someone once told me I look like as well. So I haven't had a lower moment. But these are kids, these are my kids who believe that everyone has something to teach them, and they have something to learn from everyone. And who truly believes when we have really bad parenting moments and we say, whose job's more important, mom's or dad's? They consistently say dad's, because you know what dad is? He's a teacher. And they feel like that is the most important thing in the world. My 10-year-old son took me aside the other day and he said, "Mom," he goes, I didn't want to say it while we were all talking about this, but you actually work with more kids, so technically you have a volume advantage. And I appreciated that, I nodded. But these are kids to whom we are imparting these values, and I hope one day they can grow up and have their own leadership journey in which they find a place where they can too honor all people. So thank you.